Today we're going to talk about one of the worst mass murders in Arkansas history. But before we get started, welcome to True Crime with Maneater. If you love all things true crime, including missing person cases, cold cases, and just the strange happenings of the world, you've come to the right place. Be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss a video upload. Let's get started. Ronald Gene Simmons was born on July 15th, 1940, in Chicago, Illinois. He was born to Loretta and William Simmons, and unfortunately his father, William Simmons, would die of a stroke in 1943. A year later, his mother, Loretta, would marry again, and this time to a civil engineer for the U.S. Army Corps. Because she married a man in the U.S. Army, they were moved to Little Rock in 1946, and that would be the first of many transfers that the family would make across central Arkansas for the next decade. In 1957, Ronald Simmons would drop out of school and join the U.S. Navy. He was first stationed in Washington, and when he was there, he met a woman known as Becky, who would later become his wife. They would marry in New Mexico in July of 1960, and over the next 18 years, the couple would welcome 7 children. In 1963, he would retire from the Navy, and then 2 years later, he would join the Air Force. He did have a 22-year military career, and during that time, he was awarded a Bronze Star, the Republic of Vietnam Cross for his service as an airman, and then the Air Force Ribbon for excellent marksmanship. He would retire in November of 1979, and at that time, he was a master sergeant. But in 1981, the New Mexico Department of Human Services began to investigate him. They believe that he fathered a child with a 17-year-old girl. Once Ronald Simmons learned that he was being investigated, he fled. The family would eventually take up residence on a 13-acre tract of land that would become known as Mockingbird Hill. Basically, the residence consisted of 2 older model mobile homes joined together to form one large home, and it was surrounded by makeshift privacy fence, which was about 10 feet tall in some places. The home didn't have a telephone or indoor plumbing. During this time, he worked a bunch of low-paying jobs. One of them was accounts receivable clerk at a motor freight company, but he did quit after numerous reports of inappropriate sexual advances. And then he'd work at a mini mart for about a year and a half before quitting. And then in December of 1987, nobody truly knew what was going to happen. On December 22nd, 1987, Ronald Gene Simmons would beat his wife to death before shooting her. He would then turn to his 29-year-old son, Ronald Gene Simmons Jr., who had been visiting the family. He would beat him to death and shoot him. He would then turn his rage to his 3-year-old granddaughter and strangle her. They were found in a shallow pit, and it turns out that Ronald Simmons had told his children to dig this pit months before the murder. He told them it was for an outhouse. I question if he knew he was going to murder them months before he did, or if he just suddenly snapped and did it, and then just realized that it was a great place to hide the bodies. I'm not sure. On the same day, his younger children were dropped off by the school bus. And of course, they were excited because it was Christmas break time. So they didn't have to go to school. They were coming home, they were excited, they were happy. These children's ages ranged from 17, 14, 11, and 8. And unfortunately, they had no idea what was going to happen to them. Based on the evidence, they believe that Ronald Simmons separated his children and went one by one and strangled them or drowned them in a rain barrel. He would then drag their bodies to the same hole and place them in there. On December 26, 1987, his older children had been invited over for Christmas dinner. 23-year-old William Simmons II, his 21-year-old wife, Retna Simmons, and their 20-month-old son all came to dinner. And when they arrived, William and Retna were shot, and they were left by the dining room table and covered with their own coats and some bedding. Then, strangely enough, he murdered the child and placed the child in a trunk in a car behind his home. And then his other children arrived. Next, his daughter Sheila would arrive with her 33-year-old husband, and with them were their 2 children, 7-year-old Sylvia and 21-month-old Michael. The thing is, Ronald had been sexually abusing his daughter, and that 7-year-old girl, Sylvia, that was his child with his daughter. He started by shooting his daughter and then put her body on the dining room table and covered it with a tablecloth. He would shoot Dennis, and then strangle Sylvia. And then Michael was also strangled, but he placed him in the trunk of another parked car. And then strangely enough, he'd get in his car, go to Sears, pick up some Christmas gifts that hadn't come in on time. After that, he left, went to a private club, stayed there for some time, and then he went home and stayed there for the weekend. On Monday, December 28th, he would take his son's car, go to Walmart, and purchase another gun. He would then head to a law firm. Upon entering the law firm, he shot and killed the receptionist, Kathy Gribbins Kendrick, and then he went to the Taylor Oil Company, where he wounded Russell Rusty Taylor, who was the owner of Sinclair Mini Mart, where he had once worked. He then shot and killed JD Jim Chafin, a fireman and part-time truck driver for Taylor Oil. He would shoot and miss another employee before exiting the building. He would head over to the Sinclair Mini Mart, where he shot and wounded Roberta Woolley and David Saylor. He would finally go to the Woodline Motor Freight Company, found his former supervisor, Joyce Butts, and wounded her in the head and chest by shooting her. He would then abduct Vicki Jackson at gunpoint into the computer office and told her to phone the police. Allegedly, he told Vicki, "I've come to do what I wanted to do. It's all over now. I've gotten everybody who wanted to hurt me." Police would arrive, and he would surrender without incident. Pretty quickly, he was sent to the Arkansas State Hospital in Little Rock for an evaluation. The doctor did rule that he was sane and capable to stand trial. Eventually, he was convicted on May 12th, 1988. He was then sentenced to death by lethal injection, and he never appealed his sentence. Everybody was curious about a motive, and apparently they found an undated note in a safe deposit box at Russellville Bank after Ronald Simmons' arrest. And it seems the letter indicated a love-hate relationship between his daughter, Shayla, and him. Apparently the judge did rule this letter admissible in court, and at that time Ronald Simmons lashed out and punched his lawyer in the face. And then he was struggling with a deputy for his handgun. Obviously, at this point, there's a lot of chaos, and officers are jumping on top of him, trying to get him, off of this guard, off of this sheriff, to make sure that he didn't, get a gun in his hand, because he's very violent. And they finally get him pinned down, and they escort him out of the courtroom. On May 31st, 1990, Governor Bill Clinton signed Simmons' second execution warrant for June 25th, 1990. And at this time, it was the quickest sentence to execution to death time in the U.S. history since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976. Apparently, Ronald Simmons refused all visitors, including legal counsel and the clergy. His last words were, "Justice delayed, finally be done, is justifiable homicide." No family members came forward to claim his body, so he was buried in a plot in Lincoln Memorial Lawn and Varner. So he did support his sentencing, and he even said, "I, Ronald Gene Simmons Sr., want it to be known that it is my wish and my desire that absolutely no action by anybody be taken to appeal or in any way change this sentence. It is further respectfully requested that this sentence be carried out expeditiously." As for motive, I feel like that's just a complicated question. Ronald Gene Simmons had been sexually abusing his daughter. Even so, he fathered a child with her because of those rapes. I'm sure he was terrified that perhaps he was going to be caught, or this news was going to come out and he was going to be arrested. But it doesn't make sense that he went on an entire rampage and killed every single one of his children, family members, and then he would go to the place he used to work, multiple places, and begin murdering people there. It really does seem that he was just a violent person. And given the fact that he had been fired from places for being sexually aggressive, I mean, it kind of makes sense that he was a predator. But I would love to know your thoughts on this case. Did this man snap and just murder his whole family and people he proclaimed wronged him? Or was he a violent criminal that was going to do this eventually? But that's it for today, guys. If you like this video or any other video on my channel, be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss a video upload. If there's a case you'd like me to cover, pop it in the comments below, and I'll be sure to get to it. In the meantime, check out some other videos on my channel while you wait for the next upload, and I'll see you then.